Thanks so much. Very nice to see you all. Hope you're having a good afternoon. I'm Tommy Stadlen. I'm one of the co-founders of Giant Ventures. We're a multi-stage venture firm. We back purpose-driven technology founders like these brilliant people here. We have a really simple insight, which is that we think the largest technology companies that will be built this decade and beyond are going to be purpose-driven, solving problems that really matter. We are all former founders at Giant, unlike 92% of European VCs, which we think is kind of crazy. And we back the most bright, the most ambitious entrepreneurs who are trying to solve category-defining problems for the world and then build really big businesses out of it, just like you two guys. We're going to talk a little bit about what it actually takes to build a climate giant in Europe from a founder's perspective. And so I thought it'd be awesome to bring here today two of the very best from the Giant portfolio at slightly different stages of a company life cycle, both brilliant companies in very different fields. So we have Julie from Ureta, Santi from Papaya. We're going to talk about why it's different to build a climate company to a non-climate company. We're going to talk about the vision that you guys have. What will the climate impact be if you succeed, which you will? And then a little bit about the difference between climate hardware and software. What's it like raising capital as a climate founder? And then if we have time at the end, we'll talk about some of the other trends you're most interested in. But maybe we could just start with a bit of an overview of what the company does, what the vision is. Maybe Julie, start with you.
Yes, happy to, thank you. So our vision with Ureta is to simply transform agriculture to the better for our climate, for our environment, and for human health, essentially. So we do that by getting as many farmers with as many hectares as possible to transition into what is called regenerative agriculture. The benefits of that is many. So it's both there will be more soil resilience, there will be more nutrition in our food, there will be higher biodiversity. Last but not least, there will be carbon capture, nature-based carbon capture. So our fields have the same opportunity as our forests to actually sequester carbon out of our atmosphere and store it in the soil. We can quantify that into what is called carbon credits, sell them on the voluntary carbon market or to the supply chain and Scope 3 solutions to really mobilize even more farmers to transition. In short.
Amazing. And let's fast forward, 2030 or a few years' time. If and when Ureta really, really scales, and you're pretty big already, what is the climate impact going to be? Maybe bring it to life for the audience. Like, how good or bad is it for the climate if you really scale?
So by 2030, if we succeed, which we will, there's 120 megatons that will be sequestered and stored in. Essentially, it's in more soil than what the US fills today. So it's a humongous amount of farmers and hectares that we need to transition. Right now, we're live across 18 countries with 2 million hectares. So there's probably, you can 10x that in just the amount of hectares. And that's just the impact on carbon. Right now, it's not as easy to quantify really the biodiversity effects. But I'm super excited that by 2030, we'll actually also know how many more worms or bees we can actually see from this transition. Right now, difficult to quantify.
I think what's so cool, one of the things that's so cool about Ureta is that it is removing carbon from the atmosphere sort of now, this decade. And I think so much that we see as climate investors is sort of science projects around carbon removal that might happen in 2030 or 2040. And there are very few ways that we can actually remove carbon now. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about Ureta.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that it's year on year. So the 120 megatons is yearly. So that is every year. It's around, I think, a third of the UK's emissions in total that yearly they can sequester and store in the soils, if managed correctly, of course.
Extremely exciting. As exciting, Santi, as Papaya. Tell us a little bit about the vision for the company.
Thanks, Tommy. It's a pleasure to be here. So at Papaya, we're enabling the electrification of fleets through a collaboration software layer. So basically, we have a vehicle management system that acts as a multi-sided platform, enabling fleet operators and service providers to interact within each other. So basically, through a software layer, you can really manage charging, maintenance, insurance, financing, and all the different stakeholders that you need to make that transition. Our vision is really creating a market network that can enable an the biggest ecosystem for sustainable vehicles in the world. really creating that one single operating system that anyone that wants to consume a service on a sustainable vehicle, they can just play in, and anyone that wants to offer a service on a sustainable vehicle, they can just offer it there. And the beauty is that every service that you find in this market network, you can then operate with the same system, solving the interoperability issues.
And maybe for the audience, just to bring it to life a bit in terms of why this matters, again, if Papaya becomes what we all think it's going to become and really starts to help electrify large swathes of the European corporate fleets and other fleets, what kind of an impact is that going to have on carbon reduction?
We are a lot early stage than Agrina, but at the moment, the last mile represents around 50% of the delivery carbon emissions. And this is due to increase around 32% by 2030, due to e-commerce deliveries increasing, traffic congestion also increasing. So it's pretty big. What we expect is by 2035 to be helping fleet operators to reduce around 3.5 million tons of CO2 from the roads.
Amazing. Really exciting again. We see, I think, in climate investment world, this sort of big divide, right, between climate software and climate hardware. And I think a lot of the generalist venture firms are pretty terrified of hardware. They want to be doing something in climate. And so software companies like your two companies become extremely exciting to them. You know, I think when we look now, clearly, as Santi, as you mentioned, Agrina is a little bit later in its life and has become really already one of the core kind of backbones of the European green economy and has raised a lot of money very successfully. And you know, with Papaya, I think it was probably one of the most oversubscribed seed rounds in European history. It got a bit ridiculous. We receive just constantly inbound about Papaya because it's almost like the VC's dream in terms of the shape of the company. They're both really scalable, high margin, you know, in some ways classic internet marketplace / fintech platforms that can really scale very, very quickly. But they are also kind of incentivizing physical change in the real world. Was that quite a deliberate choice that you both made when you were sort of starting the companies to say, okay, well, it's got to be scalable, this has got to be VC backable, but on the other hand, we do actually need to physically impact carbon removal, even if we're not the ones doing it on balance sheet? How much of that was a sort of deliberate, thought-through strategy versus lucky coincidence that's made fundraising easy for both of you?
Well, it was definitely deliberate that it needed to be scalable. So for us, I mean, we're looking at agriculture, and that is global, naturally global. So we knew that if we wanted to do any change and any real impact, we needed it to be scalable. So anything that we do, and have been doing from the beginning, just needed to have that scalable global outlook. So that has been very deliberate. However, the sort of what isn't so clear with us is that even though we're a software company, if you will, we have a backbone of heavy sort of technology and science and research-based methodology that needs to, almost similar to medicine authorization, needs to go through heavy third-party verification. So we're still under, you know, a 2-year verification process right now. So that's a little bit not so similar to a software company otherwise, but yeah.
How did you, Julia, manage to, you know, ensure that these huge farms are actually adopting regenerative agriculture, removing the carbon, sort of ensuring that happens without doing it on balance sheet and making it part of your core business? How did you get that balance right?
So really, that was a huge investment for us. Very early on, we took a bet, if you will. We believed that this needed to be digitally scalable to verify that farmers were actually making the changes that they reported to us. So we acquired the company called Hummingbird Technologies, a UK-based satellite imagery and machine learning company that can automatically map out, essentially globally, every field out there and verify whether the right machinery has been used on each field down to each specific hectare, so that we can start quantifying, okay, so what does that mean in terms for carbon sequestration on that specific hectare? So we've done a lot of investment, both financially, but also just time and resources into digitally verifying the farmers' sort of very manual changes out in the field.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Santi, for you, I mean, obviously you and your co-founder come from very scalable software backgrounds, places like Deliveroo. How did you think through, you know, climate software versus doing a climate hardware company?
For us, was very much organic. So I had the problem myself. I used to manage a fleet, to set up a sustainable fleet. And it was really difficult because the interoperability issues. You have a lot of hardware, different types of hardwares, but then you need to operate with a mixed fleet, with a hybrid fleet. So that's when we decided there is a need of an agnostic software layer that can enable the collaboration between all these different people, all these different stakeholders, and it enables you to use different hardware types, all combined into one single platform. So it was very much organic.
Okay. I want to ask you both a little bit about the realities of running a climate company and what it's like. So, I mean, Santi, you came from food delivery world, right? And if you compare the sort of the purpose, the mission from the team in your previous life versus your company now, what is it like running a climate company in terms of the purpose that the talent have, the ability to raise capital from different sources? Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's very different. First, it's slightly more challenging because you have to make a business case for it, but at the same time to have an impact. So I find this more exciting, and the team does as well. The second one, I think, on talent, it's been amazing, right? Because every single person that joins the company is actually a missionaire, and we don't have many mercenaries, or like people don't really care so much about the salaries. It's all about the mission, the impact that we're having. And then it's easier said than done. You need to really stick to your words and put sustainability or impact in the core of your business. And there is challenging times where like you have a lot of customers asking you to prioritize specific features that they need, right? And not many requests related to like sustainability, but because we have a very clear mission, we want to stick to it, and you need to make those trade-offs and sometimes prioritize impact features that maybe these customers, they need this education, we need really that transition to accelerate that transition, and it comes later on. So those will be some of the differences. For me personally, I love it a lot more. I feel much better when I'm sitting at home with my family and speaking about what I do.
Very cool.
Yeah, I can definitely echo all of that. The little bit of a conundrum where everyone is joining the company with the same purpose, and that purpose is somehow a natural motivator for just getting up in the morning. So it's full of motivation across the team, for me personally as well. But right now, we're sort of in this acknowledgement of really understanding across the whole team that it is profits that will be driving the impacts. So whether it's trade-offs, it doesn't need to be either or, but at least there's a phasing of it that we need to be able to run a business to actually drive the impact that we want to. So that communication and transparency is just super important. Yeah.
Is there anything that either of you wish you'd known when you were starting out building these two big climate companies that you know now?
Well, if I knew everything, I probably wouldn't have started. No, I'm not sure it would have helped, and this is probably counting for out of climate companies as well. But being a category builder, it has really surprised me how fast a market can change. So when we started just 2-3 years ago, launched our first program, nobody knew what regenerative agriculture was. Nobody knew what the benefits were. We needed to educate everyone we spoke to, whether it was farmers, regulators, whoever we spoke to. And now it's like we're trying to hold on to the market just developing so fast. So in a split of a second, it has changed from us really being the leaders in a blue ocean market where there's no competitors to suddenly there's competitors everywhere, there's regulation coming, and that change has just happened in a couple of weeks, it feels like.
Yeah, it's amazing speed of transition, isn't it?
Yes.
Santi, anything you wish you had known, maybe for entrepreneurs in the room?
Very similar as well, like how quickly the market changed and how unpredictable it is, that it seems that sometimes we're going towards one direction and then suddenly everything changed and it gets accelerated. For us, we had to do a little bit of education. Now in Europe, thanks to the regulations and the tailwinds, everything is picking up a lot. Maybe too quick sometimes, maybe too slow other times, so that's definitely a clear one. And then coming back to the previous point, having very clear that you need to solve a business case that has an impact. You can just not build a company based on impact. You need to be solving a business case that has an impact.
Amazing. I'd love to ask you both just a little bit about the role of your co-founders and your teams, because you both, I think, come from companies which have a founding team with real complementary skills and very different strengths and weaknesses. I'd love to learn just a little bit about that and how you thought about putting the team together that could make these companies successful. Julie, maybe starting with you.
Yes, happy to. We were actually just having the conversation out in the back, because I think for us, it's been one of the most the best decisions to do very early, even when me and my co-founder a couple of years ago went out to find our third co-founder. We very early on went out to find a very experienced co-founder who could take a little bit of the lead, who's now Simon, our CEO, to help break the glass ceiling for us. We then, the three of us, decided, even again early on, to build a leadership team that could help us both make decisions, grow the company, recruit the people, so that we could grow from the 20 to now 200 employees we are in just a little over a year and a half. That would have never been done if it was just Ida and myself. So I think it's just super important to, almost before you think you're ready for it, hire in some as experienced people as possible. Not necessarily from startups, from corporates as well. Having varied experiences are just immensely important.
We have a much smaller team. We're just 16 people. And what I'll say is that for us, the key, or what we learned so far, is that quality over quantity. Like really, the biggest impact that you can have in your own company is hiring the right people and hiring complementary people. At the early stage, there is a lot that needs to be defined, and you are learning on the way. So having very specialist people versus generalist, I always go to more some generalist people with very clear skills, with very driven, that then they can help us to figure out what works, and almost give them a blank canvas that they can build their own journey into the company.
I think it's really interesting, this idea of teams, and often when we're looking as an investor at an entrepreneur who's building their second or third or fourth company, and they were part of a co-founding team, we're often trying to find out, okay, were they the main founder at the previous company? Were they the reason that the successful company they did before really worked? And you can try and get answers to that. And I think increasingly what we realize is it is often the combination, right? And yes, there might have been one dominant founder or one, more extrovert founder or the visionary, but really it is the combination. I think that's part of the strength of both of your companies. You have really very strong teams, not just one person leading everything.
Exactly. I think while we externally, it might often be myself or Simon as the founders who are here on stage, but really when we're in the company, in the office, we don't really work as founders. So we're part of the leadership team, part of the team, but we don't necessarily have another role than my CCO right next to me. So I think that's really important to take the founder hat off as early as possible, at least when internally looking.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, we have a little bit more time. I just want to ask you both, if you were not doing your current company, what would you be building in climate? What's the most exciting climate trend that everyone in the audience needs to think about?
I want to be in agriculture. No, I think actually I would want to try and apply some of the thinking that we have done to agriculture to any of the other great technologies out there, because I don't think we have a need for more new technologies. I think we have great technologies out there, whether it's the energy solution, green energy solutions, but what we need is really scalability and globalization of that. So great financing mechanisms to ensure that the global south can actually access some of these technologies. I think that is what I would want to look into at least, or digging into something else around agriculture, because it's immensely big and there's so much to do.
Fantastic. Santi, in 20 seconds, what should we be doing?
I'm very much in love with mobility and electrification, but if I had to do something different, probably it will be something more deep tech, maybe something on the energy sector as well, on the renewables. Yeah, but don't think much on that. I'm very happy where I am.
Very happy where you are. No transfers. Fantastic. I'm really, really glad that we could have done this today. I genuinely believe that in Ureta and Papaya, we've got two of the category-defining climate technology companies, not just in Europe, but beyond. And the future, I think, is very bright, both for the companies, but also for the climate, because of people like you. And we at Giant are so optimistic about solving the climate crisis through entrepreneurship, and it's because of the likes of you. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us today on stage. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.